proud of my colleagues on the board for the seriousness in which they took in this process and their commitment to finding the ideal match for Pennridge. On December 19, 2017, Superintendent Jacqueline Radigan announced to the board that she was planning to retire effective June 30, 2018. The board is grateful for Dr. Radigan's service to our district. Shortly after receiving the announcement from Dr. Radigan, the Pennridge Board of School Directors sought the services of the Bucks County Intermediate Unit to guide us through this process of finding the next superintendent of Pennridge. There's a reason they conduct almost all superintendent searches here in Bucks County. They have this down to a science and provide tremendous support every step of the way. The Pennridge School District works hand in hand with the IU on a regular basis. They know us well and have a vested interest in the success of this district. Dr. Mark Hoffman, Rebecca Malamis, and Joanne Parati have been instrumental. We cannot begin to thank them enough. The board followed a comprehensive search process, which included multiple rounds of candidate screening. The board conducted a community-wide survey to gather feedback in order to help frame questions and guide decisions during the interview process. We received over 1,000 responses to the survey, highlighting once again the dedication of this community to the future of Pennridge School District. The Pennridge Board of School Directors initially advertised for the position of School District Superintendent on February 15, 2018 through March 12, 2018. The search was far-reaching with ads placed locally, statewide, and nationally. The district received 25 applications for the position. The board thoroughly reviewed all 25 applications and chose 12 to interview in the initial first-round interviews, which were held over 2 evenings on April 3rd and April 4th. The board narrowed the applicant pool down to 4 candidates, who returned for more thorough and comprehensive second-round interviews on April 12th. Following the second round of interviews, the board unanimously agreed to a finalist candidate, Dr. David Bolton, who was invited back for a final third-round interview on April 25th. After the final interview process, an initial offer was made to Dr. Bolton, and negotiations began with his attorney on securing an agreement with him to serve as Pennridge School District Superintendent. The board approved Dr. Bolton's contract for this position at the May 14th school board meeting, and Dr. Bolton will start on August 1st. Dr. David Bolton currently serves as Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education in the Central Bucks School District. Dr. Bolton has 29 years in education, serving as a teacher and administrator. After graduating from Lebanon Valley College, he taught math in the Pennsbury School District for 12 years. He received his master's in educational leadership from Arcadia University and served 13 years as an assistant principal and principal in the Pennsbury and Central Bucks school districts. Having received his doctorate in educational leadership from Widener University, he has spent the last 4 years as the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education in Central Bucks. Dr. Bolton and his wife have 4 children and live in Doylestown. Dr. Bolton exemplifies all of the characteristics set forth by the community and incorporated into our application and interview processes. His reputation precedes him. The board was impressed with not only his exceptional knowledge and experience at all levels of education, which was extremely important, but also his honesty, integrity, analytical reasoning, receptiveness, passion for education, humor, work ethic, professionalism, fiscal sense, attention to detail, and dedication to family and community involvement. He is committed to educating the whole child and meeting the individual needs of each student in the most inclusive setting appropriate. Helping all students develop a personal connection to an extracurricular activity, such as music, arts, sports, or other clubs, is a strong ambition of his. Providing the information and supports needed for students to find and succeed in their chosen career paths, whether they are college-bound, learning a trade, or embarking on another journey, is another key focus of Dr. Bolton's. I have full confidence in his ability to bring even greater success to Pennridge for years to come. Tonight, we welcome Dr. Mark Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Bucks County Intermediate Unit, to lead us through the events this evening.
Good evening. I'm Mark Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director of the Bucks County Intermediate Unit. It is our pleasure to have helped the Pennridge School District facilitate this search. Congratulations to Dr. Bolton. Thank you, Ms. Banis-Clemens, and to the other 8 members of the Pennridge School Board for the opportunity to assist the school district with this very, very important decision. In fact, selecting a superintendent is in fact one of the most important decisions that a school community can make and the school board of directors can make. At the Bucks County Intermediate Unit, we are one of 29 educational service agencies that support the schools and school districts of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it's our pleasure at the Bucks County Intermediate Unit to serve the 13 school districts and countless non-public schools of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and beyond. The order of events for this evening are as follows. Very shortly, Dr. Bolton will have an opportunity to address the group here, as well as the folks that are watching from home, because this is also being streamed live over the internet and recorded so that folks can watch it at a later point in time. Dr. Bolton and I will then head to the stage where we'll conduct a question and answer session. The questions were created and cultivated from a survey that was available on the Pennridge website for about a week and a half. Following that question and answer session, Dr. Bolton will have one more opportunity to present himself to the community and introduce himself. And then Mrs. Banis-Clemens will wrap up the evening with closing comments. This search was particularly special for me, not only because it's a wonderful opportunity to serve school districts in Bucks County, but this one was particularly special because my wife and I are proud Pennridge parents. And so I have a daughter that attends this high school and a son that attends North next door. So I had a little bit of a vested interest in this search as a fellow proud parent of the Pennridge community. Without further ado, it's my honor to introduce to you your new superintendent, Dr. David Bolton, for his opening remarks. Dr. Bolton.
Give up the floor too quick.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on such a beautiful night. First of all, logistically, you need to help me because I'm a wanderer. They asked me, David, who's doing all the sound and light, a senior here at Pennridge. He asked me if I was a wanderer. He said yes. So he has installed tape on the floors. I am not allowed to go outside the tape. So if I'm getting close, I need you to beep with one of those backup cameras. And I'm allowed to go no further than the 3rd row because they can't see my torso if I get any closer to it. So that's my boundary. So if I get any further than that, because I am a wanderer. So thank you so much. I am just so excited to get started. When they boiled down the interview process to what it sounded like tonight, it sounded easy, right? There was nothing to it in terms of that piece. It was wonderful going through that. It has been wonderful learning about Pennridge in terms of as you go through that process and you start studying what that might look like. Potentially you might actually be asked to be the superintendent of the school district that you apply for. And so it has been thrilling that way. They say whenever you're doing a public presentation that you need to front load all of the important information because most adults will listen from anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes. And then after that, you'll listen when I say something that applies to you. So you'll hear me say something and you'll go, oh, wait a second, he's talking about kindergarten, right? And I'm in, right? But if I'm talking about high school sports, you're like, well, in a couple of years from that standpoint. And so here are the things that you truly need to know about, because we should have stopped as soon as the choir was done and said, we did a nice job, right? Because by my count, there were 7 student organizations that have already been involved, which means there have been at least 7 teachers, and my guess is far more than that have worked really hard to get the students that are in those 7 organizations prepared for whatever came next, whether that's cookies, whether that's a music theory lesson that we had tonight, that was awesome, right? Whether it was their string performance, whether it was the guitars that are outside, whatever that looked like to prepare students for that next piece is really what we're about. At my heart, I am all about meaningful learning, which only comes through quality instruction. And that is really the guide that you ought to use to judge the entire school district for as long as you're here. Because I really believe that as long as students feel safe and they feel cared for, those are the first 2 things we need to do. But when students feel safe and they feel cared for, it truly is the quality instruction that leads to the meaningful learning that matters for whatever comes next. Whether that's a math test or making cookies or moving on to college or career or the military, it really are those 2 pieces to get there. And so that's me professionally. And Mrs. Banis-Clemens did a wonderful job of kind of giving my resume, so any of you, there's another Lebanon Valley grad in the crowd? Yes, right? She came up, she goes, do you recognize me? That's always a scary question, isn't it? Right? She goes, and I was like, she goes, Lebanon Valley. I'm like, wow. Right? It's just so awesome. I've been humming It's a Small World ever since I've been offered the job because everybody's got a connection to Pennridge. So people are like, my mother lives, and my brother lives, and my Uncle Joe, and things like that. Personally, what you need to know is I'm basically my parents. I bet many of you would say that. My mom and my dad both were lifelong educators. And my mother is who I've become, I try to become personally, because she is just all about treating people kindly and respectfully and being a good person. And those are the things, I'm the youngest of 6, those are the things we heard over and over and over again. Professionally, I'm my father. My father was a teacher, a principal, an assistant superintendent. He dabbled as a superintendent. Spent most of his career in Upper Marion School District. I grew up in Norristown, grew up in Montgomery County. Since we've been married, I have moved to Bucks County. So we've raised our kids in Bucks County, but I grew up in Montgomery County. I told a story at my father's graduation. At my father's retirement. My father retired being the assistant superintendent, and as a family, I was the student who spoke. And at the time, when I graduated from high school, my mom had given me, and that was about 4 years prior to this situation, my mom had given me a paper I had written in 6th grade. And in that 6th grade paper, I had said that I wanted to be a teacher, a principal, and a superintendent. In 6th grade, I knew it. Right, so here it is. I've reached the pinnacle of what I wanted to do, all the way back to when I was 12 years old. And I told that story at my dad's retirement, and when I thought about why that was, my dad used to come home from work every day whistling. And so I'd be in the house, and you'd hear Dad, you'd hear the car, and then you'd hear him whistle up the driveway and up the back steps. I always assumed that meant he had the best job in the universe. And so I told that story. He got up after his retirement and said, "Well, David, I hate to push you up." Many times that was simply because I was happy to be home. And only about half the time was it because I had the best job in the universe. So I'm hoping I whistled more days for the good things than for those days where you're happy to be home. I know you did. I want you to meet my family because they are a really important part of who I am. And so I want you to meet my wife, Mary Catherine. Mary Catherine, if you stand up. Mary Catherine is a math professor at Bucks County Community College. She has dabbled some at Upper Bucks, although she does most of her, at the Upper Bucks campus, although she does most of her teaching down in the Newtown campus from that standpoint. But beyond that, not only is she just an amazing teacher and example that way for me in terms of that piece as we've both been educators our whole career, but she's also an unbelievable wife and an unbelievable mother to our children and just really inspires me every day. So thank you for that. 2 of our 4 children are here. The girls were able to make it, the boys were. And so I want you to meet my daughter. My daughter, Rebecca. Rebecca, please stand up and say hello. That was the most fun evening for Rebecca. Rebecca is 20. She just finished her 3rd year at Elizabethtown College. She's in a 5-year occupational therapy program. And the good news is the IU has already asked her if she's ready to work for them. Soon as they have her program she was in. So it's all about job security. She's at Elizabethtown College and just finished her 3rd year. Our youngest is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you say hello? Elizabeth is a 9th grader at Leonard Middle School, which is one of the 5 middle schools in the Central West School in terms of our own. Our sons are both still at college. We have identical twin boys who are just finishing their 1st year. Daniel is finishing his 1st year at Drexel University. He's an architectural and civil engineering major, and they're on a weird schedule at Drexel, so he's still got about 3-4 weeks left, and so he was home for the weekend, and we needed to go back. And then his brother, our other son, Stephen, is finishing his 1st year at University of Delaware. He's in chemical engineering, and he has a final again tomorrow. We said the same thing last Monday. They do finals over 2 weeks, so he has a final again tomorrow morning. So Stephen, you should be studying, turn the computer off from that standpoint. And so that is really my heart in terms of who I am personally as well as professionally. I think you've heard enough about my background in terms of the jobs that I did. One of the things that I think it helps in terms of transitioning for this position is I've been fortunate to have career opportunities at all 3 levels of education. And so at elementary, middle, and secondary, I spent lots of time. For those of you who want to know how long I'm going to be here, I spent 14.5 years at Pennsburg. I spent 14.5 years at Central Bucks. So you do the math in terms of, you can get rid of me, I forget what year that is. I calculated it once, but that's when you can get rid of me. But I'm in the long haul in terms of that. So thank you for coming tonight. I think we're going to transition up to the stage. Is that accurate? Okay, great. Thank you.
So we're now in the second of the three phases of our evening. This is the section of the night where we're going to spend some time asking Dr. Bolton a few questions. Where do the questions come from? If you'll recall, there have been several email blasts that have come out from the school district, particularly starting when his announcement of hire was made, or the intention to hire was made, where we announced that this evening would take place. And as a part of that announcement, we listed a link that allowed community members for about a week and a half to submit questions. Those questions have then been compiled and aggregated, and I've distilled them down to a few questions here tonight. The good news is that largely the themes of the questions are similar, and so we can get through essentially the spirit of every question with the efficiency of just a few short questions tonight here on the stage. After this session, again, Dr. Bolton will conclude, and then Mrs. Banis-Clemens will wrap up the evening with some closing remarks. So with that, Dr. Bolton, are we ready to get started?
I certainly am. I have to tell you that in my, when you dream about these types of events, I was on a white love seat, and you looked a lot more like Phil Donahue than you do this evening. Other than showing my age, I'm not sure what that says.
I can run up and down the aisles if you'd like. As long as no one starts chanting, Jerry, Jerry, there we go. All right. So Dr. Bolton, let's begin with a question that allows the Pennridge community to learn a little bit more about you. Can you talk about your experiences and strengths? You just mentioned a few. Mm-hmm. And in particular, can you talk about what attracted you to the school district?
Right. Well, I think answering the question in terms of what was attractive in terms of when I saw the posting in February for the Pennridge job, I think we'll get at some of those strengths. Because when you see jobs, and I felt like I was ready from a transition standpoint from an assistant superintendent to a superintendent, you start digging in. And so we've lived in Central Bucks most of our lives, and so I knew Pennridge through friends, I knew Pennridge through sports, I knew Pennridge through reputation, but I didn't really know Pennridge. So you dig in deeply. And there really were a combination of two things that I would say attracted me most to the job. First was just the sense of community that is in Pennridge. It does not surprise me that when I speak to people, they talk about graduating from Pennridge High School and now their kids are going to Pennridge High School or going to Central Middle School or wherever their students. I joked in one of the interviews about the number of school board members who must have graduated from Pennridge High School and found out that I had underestimated by 2 the actual answer. And that is just such a wonderful tribute to how the teachers and the parents and hopefully the students feel about the community that is Pennridge. And just that importance in terms of the connection with their community was one of the things. The other piece was when there was a community survey that had been done in terms of what do you hope your next superintendent looks like, does, and whatever those questions were, as well as then a job posting that kind of said, here's what we hope you're like. And it was encouraging for me that those two lists overlapped. Right? And really when I saw the job posting, I said to my wife, I said, Mary Catherine, this is who I think I am. I think I might be the right person. I'm going to go for it. And put in the application then from that standpoint. And I wrote them down so I didn't get them wrong in terms of that piece, so I apologize for reading too. I hope I have them memorized, but just in case not. When I looked at those themes, one of the things they talked about was an instructional leader. I've already spoken about my experience at all 3 levels and how I think that helps. One of the things that's really important to me when you talk about quality education is what is the training we provide? What is that professional development we provide to teachers and to administrators? Because they're the direct impact on students. I'll have an impact on students, but it will be an indirect impact on students that comes through the work that the administrators and the teachers do every day in our school buildings. And so that instructional leadership is something that I feel really, really strongly about and will be something that I'll spend my first year really talking about with administrators and teachers and with students to see how that's going in terms of in the classroom. The next one was communication. One of the things you need to know about me is I'm pretty direct, I'm pretty simple, I'm pretty clear. I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to analyze that information, I'm going to tell you what I think. So from that standpoint, to be able to know that decisions are based around good, wise counsel, and then that decision is communicated as clearly as we can, is something that I think is important in terms of communication and something that I promise to you. We've already talked about that community focus. One of the things I said in one of the interviews, and I mean very truly, is that your superintendent ought to be your chief cheerleader. Right? It will be really important for me to know Pennridge a lot better a year from now, and 5 years from now, and 14 and a half years from now than I do now. And that doesn't happen unless you're spending time in the classrooms and on the sidelines and at the concerts and all of those types of things. And so that is something I know is important to the community and really is at my heart in terms of students being involved and connected to school. And so that's something that I hope you'll see. When I'm out and about, please say hi, right? There's a lot of you and one of me, and so don't be ashamed when you see me for the second time and I have to ask you your name again. I apologize in advance. But please come up when you see me at community events. It's important for me to know how you're connected to Pennridge in terms of the things that you think are wonderful about the school district, as well as things that we'll have to be talking about that could be better 14 and a half years from now, from that standpoint. A lot of conversation around fiscal and business management. I have to admit that I'm a recovering math geek. Once you're a math geek, you're never really not a math geek. And so numbers are kind of my thing. I do use data to inform almost every decision I make, as long as there's data involved in that. I've done a pretty deep dive into the fiscals. I do have to say some wonderful things to the fiscal management of the board, of Mr. Dalbert and his team, as well as the cabinet, as they really have over the years put Pennridge in a really solid financial situation as you dive into the numbers. And so I'm appreciative of that as I walk in. And then the last one is just the social and emotional well-being of both staffs and students. It's something that is at the heart of what all school districts are talking about and wrestling with now. I think that connection to community relates to that really importantly, in terms of knowing not just that connection to that community, but like I said in my introduction, feeling safe and cared for at school is the only way that we then ticket real education that happens in the classroom. And so I really think that as you get to know me and I get to know you, I'm hopeful that you'll say, yeah, those are the boxes that I see myself in. I think those are things that I have something to offer. I know the community is strong in those areas. And so I think it'll be a really good match as we move forward. And you'll have to tell me how I'm doing.
All right, so I really want to know, is your dad really a math geek? All right, that's 2 yeses. Okay, very good.
Ask him if I'm funny, though.
Is your dad funny? All right, well done.
We're done here.
We're done. There are many ways to communicate 2018, far different than 14 and a half years ago and 14 and a half years before that. So we have in-person meetings, of course, phone calls, emails, texts, social media platforms, traditional mail, flyers, et cetera, et cetera. What's your vision for district-wide communication in Pennridge to ensure that all stakeholders remain informed?
Well, I've already talked a little bit about in terms of my personal style, in terms of that direct, clear, and positive communication about the many things that are going on. I think it's hard, I know as a parent of my 4 children going through a system that I know pretty well, there are still lots of things I don't know about. And I think that's partly because systems that are as large as Pennridge, it's hard to communicate at the granular level everything that happens, and we need to do that as well as we can. I think the introduction of your question is what makes that so difficult, that we all consume information in such varied ways, right? Some of you want 140 characters and 2 bullets, right? Tell me the truth, tell me what I need to know, let me move on, I've got a soccer game to attend. Right? Some of you want a white paper on every decision we make in the school district, including changing the chicken nuggets. And so you want to know how decisions were made, you want to know who was involved, how did I get stakeholder feedback, and you want that level. And so we have to communicate so that everyone in that range is satisfied and feels like they're being communicated well. And so we have to use a varied approach, right? We have to leverage social media. I do think that is something that school districts are catching on to. I personally, 2 years ago, started on Twitter. I'll send you my handle once I change it. It's got CB in it, and that gets me in trouble if I say it here in public. And so once I get my Pennridge handle, and I went to it 2 years ago thinking that I was just following a trend and it was important. I've realized that it's a ticket for parents and administrators to see the wonderful stuff that goes on in classrooms every day. To walk into a classroom and simply be able to tell you at home, here's the really awesome thing I saw that your kid got to do today. You often don't know because when they come home and you ask them, they didn't do that. Right? And so I think those types of experiences, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or even Instagram, I think are things that we need to talk about. But we also have people who want to touch a piece of paper, right? Or we have people who aren't parents. I've spent a lot of time struggling with how do you best communicate with community members who aren't connected to a school but are as invested in the school district as anyone else because maybe their students have already graduated, right? Or they simply live in the community, and because they're a taxpayer, they feel strongly about the school district and the work that we do. How do we communicate with them because they're not getting emails? One of the things that I know I'll look at my first year is really classroom to classroom and school to school. What does that look like? My experience is sometimes that can be pretty varied in terms of, second grade in one building versus second grade in another building, or one building versus another building. And for us to be able to share and not compare, but to be able to say, hey, this is working really well. Hey, at Central, South, why don't you do that? Or why don't you try that because that's working? And have those levels, as well as asking lots of questions about what works and doesn't in terms of communication that people are expecting.
For the record, my son at North loves the chicken nuggets.
Awesome.
Do not change the chicken nuggets. So that's your communication style specific from Dr. Bolton out to the community. How will you solicit feedback from the community to you? Several parents ask questions about, for example, the monthly superintendent meetings with parents. So have you given that any thought?
I have. One of the phrases that I probably say too much, because my wife rolls her eyes now at this point when I say it, is the synergy of teams. And one of the things that I think I'm good at, and again, you'll have to evaluate that in 14 and a half years, is I think I'm good at making sure that anyone who's impacted by the decision is part of that conversation. It then is an honest conversation about the good, the bad, the ugly, the pros and the cons. And then the decision is made, there's a consensus built, there's a decision made, and then you communicate and move forward that decision, and then evaluate it, right? Sometimes you get it right, hopefully more than you'd get it wrong. But even if you get it wrong, it's still important to go through a solid process and then to evaluate it and change course if you need to 3 months, 6 months, or a year later. And so regardless of what the situation is, to make sure that whoever the stakeholders are, right, and that often is parents and students in terms of those voices and how we gather that. So that can be conversations. That can be natural groupings. We have some natural groupings in school that we have where we can pull on parents or students, as well as surveys. I do think that we under-ask kids how things are going. I think we under-ask parents how things are going and then use that information to evaluate situations. And so that's kind of the process that I'll follow in terms of making sure that everyone feels heard.
The next question is about finance. You mentioned math and data. So in any school district, of course, there are limited financial resources, but lots of ideas. Several residents would like to know more about how you'll balance fiscal responsibility with the continuous improvement of a school district and the high-quality student programming and curriculum-related expectations that we all have.
I do want to reiterate that coming into any new position, especially if you're moving into a school district as the superintendent, one of the things that can very quickly submarine your tenure, but even the success of the school district, is the financial footing. School districts that struggle with planning or struggle with buildings that are of age or with tax burdens, shrinking enrollment, some of the things that lots of school districts in Pennsylvania are dealing with, but have not prepared or have not thought through those, can really suffer. And so one of the things, partly because I like to do it, but also because I think it was prudent to do, was I did a pretty deep dive into the financials. You look at things like fund balance, you look at capital planning, and is there a plan for buildings that are of different ages? School districts can get themselves strapped and all of a sudden the roof or an HVAC system or wiring needs to be replaced, and that's not a regular budget occurrence. And that's not the glamorous part of what the school board does and what the superintendent does and what the cabinet does and Mr. Dalbert and his team do, but it's really, really important. And I do have to tell you that as I've looked into the school district, there are a lot of really healthy habits that are there. I think that's a tribute to the board because that's not a new thing. I think that's ages and probably board members who are not even in the room anymore in terms of years and years of wise fiscal decisions around the need for that, as well as then the cabinet team that helping to set those priorities from that standpoint.
Dr. Bolton, a parent has asked to learn more about your vision for supporting character education initiatives in the school district and what you'll do to help develop a greater sense of student pride. So what might social emotional learning, student pride, character education look like here in Pennridge under your leadership?
One of the things that is really important to me, and I think I've said it in a couple different ways, like you said, a lot of these questions overlap in terms of themes and what's important, I think, to a school district and to me personally, is just the connection a student has to school. And so if I were to say to you, think of your 2 or 3 favorite memories of school. Most of you are not like me. You're not thinking isosceles triangles and Pythagorean theorem, right? That's what first came to my mind. But my guess would be most of you are telling stories about people, right? A teacher who changed your life, right? I am a nurse because of Mrs. Smith, right? Or whatever that looks like. Or the day where you had a really bad whatever, right? Whether it was real drama or fake drama, and a teacher made a difference, or a counselor made a difference, or a nurse made a difference. Or you talk about the team you were a part of, or the choir you sang in, and you got to throw cymbal on the stage for the new superintendent. You know, those are the types of stories that I think many of us tell. And if students are not connected to whatever they're doing, they're not going to be as successful as we can. And if we say it's important, and I think that the motto is important, to think about having proud students, right? And that's that love of Pennridge, that's important of what we're doing. The principled, and that's that character education that you're talking about, that part of our role, both as parents but also as educators, is making sure that we're talking about what type of young adult, what type of adult should you become, what is important to know, and teach them, right? There are things that we all can learn in that area. And then ultimately prepare in terms of whatever that looks like next. But part of that has to do with being a successful citizen and being a successful community member, because a high percentage of them apparently are coming back to Pennridge to raise their own children. So it'll be important that they're good people as they come back and they then start to raise their children in that system. So I know Dr. Radigan has been wonderful to me since this announcement. She has reached out to me multiple times. We've had multiple conversations and have many more scheduled as we get to that transition. I'm trying to pick her brain as much before the end of June as humanly possible. And one of the things that is truly her heart that I think shows up in the school district is around social emotional wellness and students and care. The Takes Pride program is just one example of that, but I think that's a great visible idea because everybody's talking the same language. And so that looks very different to a kindergarten student than it does to an 11th grader, but it's still important that they're all talking about dependability this month. And what does that look like for me, and why is that important? I think those types of pieces, saying it out loud, I think makes it more important. And so I think it's vital for a school system to do that, and I really do appreciate the work that she's done and the school district has done in that area.
Well said. Several residents, Dr. Bolton, are interested in learning more about how, as the superintendent, you'll approach working with the 9 members of the school board and with all members of the community to ensure that the school district continues improving in all areas. What will you do to help build a unified vision at all levels that's focused on the continued success of Pennridge students?
Well, first, I can't thank them enough, right? For those of you who are here, I really do appreciate that. And those of you who reached out and told me that you weren't able to attend for illness or family functions. I really do appreciate the process that we went through. I flippantly joked about it seeming simple as you addressed that, and I know it was not. It was not simple for me, and you got to go through it 12 times and then 5 times, and besides the conversations in between, and I know how hard Dr. Hoffman can be as a taskmaster in terms of running through that. So I do appreciate and do not take lightly the responsibility and the trust that you've put in me. And so I thank you for that. I can say to the rest of the community that through the entire process, we've had some real honest conversations. We've had some real direct conversations, both about what I feel as well as what they feel and they see as the strengths. I've found the board across the board, all 9 of them in that setting, as they've had their opportunities to interact with me personally and also corporately as a group, to be a tremendous supportive of Pennridge board. They've been honest with me in terms of the strengths as well as areas. One of the real positive pieces is I went into that last interview. When you go through the superintendent process, often you don't interact much. You don't get to ask much until the end, right? So all those things that you want to know about come out in the last interview. And it was a wonderful hour and a half of just sitting around. Right? They put me through an hour and 15 minutes of a presentation and an interview of me. And then for an hour and a half, we talked about the things I wanted to talk about. We talked about what's important to you. And I can promise you and assure you that I wasn't walking away with, hey, here are the 4 things we need to make sure you do in the first year. There's not an agenda there. They love Pennridge. They want what is best for Pennridge, which is what you all want for Pennridge too. And we may not agree exactly what the next 3 steps ought to be, but then that's some of those other questions that you talked about in terms of consensus and building. So I really do appreciate that. They have asked me simply to build upon the strengths, to come in, get to know the people, build upon the strengths and look for areas that need improving, and then synergize the team to get that done. And that solely is what I'm going to look to do over the first 14 and a half years of my tenure.
So as you mentioned, Pennridge is rather large, a lot of stakeholders, many schools, and many, many student events during the day, during the evening, and on weekends. As the superintendent, what approach will you take to attending school events both during the day, during the evening, and on weekends?
So I've already stated that an attachment to school is vital. And so all of those things that you're talking about, no matter what the events are, generally involve students attaching to school in a different way, although you can have reading Olympics and math counts and things like that that are a little more academic in terms of connecting directly to the curriculum. But it is important as the chief cheerleader for me to recognize, for me to encourage, and for me to celebrate those. So part of that is I think the intent of the question, in that I just need to be visible, right? That's partly why I said to you, when you see me the second time, please introduce yourself again, right? Don't assume I read you, because I hope that you'll see me more than once. I hope it won't be tonight and then we'll see you at graduation for your child, or whatever that looks like. It is really important for me to be involved. One of the teachers last Monday, the very first thing that happened to me after the announcement is I started walking up to the stage because we were posing for some pictures, and a teacher got right in front of me and stopped me cold. She introduced herself and she said, "I have got to tell you about the art fair, right? You talked about wanting to be involved. The art fair is Thursday, yada, yada," and just loved and loved and loved and loved and loved on the art fair. And so I looked at my personal calendar, I'm like, oh, darn, there's something going on. So I called the high school principal and I said, "Any way I can sneak in Thursday during the day and at least interact with some students and see the art fair?" Because I was not able to, because I had a personal family function that Thursday night. And so for an hour, Mr. Hagan was nice enough to walk me around the art fair. So I got to meet kids who were doing their AP. I got to meet students who made a ukulele, right, which was really, really cool in terms of that piece. And so those are the types of things that are vital and that I want to be involved in from that standpoint. I meant it when I said the part of the night that I will remember the most is that there were 7 student groups that were involved in getting it ready, which means there were how many parents involved in getting them here and getting them home and making sure the sparkling vests look good, and all those types of things that go into a night like this.
I still have that song stuck in my head on repeat right now, actually.
1, 5, 6 minor 4. Got
There
it.
we go. So parents asked very specific questions through the survey mechanism. Some of them focused on kindergarten transportation, second grade swimming, inter-rater reliability of teacher grading practices, and so on. So because you're not yet in the seat, I'm not going to ask you to comment about those very specific Pennridge-focused questions. Instead, let's talk about the approach you'll take to learn more about the district's current practices, like those, for example, and how you'll determine if they're effectively meeting the needs of students.
Well, I am willing to do 20 minutes on inter-rater reliability if you'd like to, because my daughter just took that class this year, so we were helping her study. So I'm ready for
Let's
that.
do it.
That's a math geek thing for me. I think that when you think about those items, and everybody in this audience would have 1 or 2 that you would add to that, right? Some of those you'd say, yeah, that's mine too, and there were other ones that you would add. I would hope that, like with those 3, when you think about kindergarten and second grade swimming and inter-rater reliability, they're all at their heart student focused. And so I think it's really, really important to think about if they truly do impact a student to that level, then they deserve our best effort in terms of the way that we go about making thoughtful decisions. Some of them are probably easier than others in terms of that. I appreciate the fact that you're not going to commit me to what we're doing about kindergarten transportation tonight, since I know only a little bit in terms of the history and what that looks like and in terms of the school district. But I do promise that as you think about a process to help learn about those, part of that is just being there, right? Making sure that you're putting yourself in those conversations. But it's also really a sense in terms of asking good questions, listening to the answers you get, using that information to then plan what it looks like. It relates back to the earlier question when we talked about having the people in the room who are impacted by that decision, and then making as good of a decision as you can. Right? Everybody in that room cares about kids and cares that they get what is best for them. And so to utilize that synergy of teams to make sure that the outcome is best. And those are the types of things that as we're interacting with stakeholders and with the cabinet and with the administrators and with teachers and with students and with parents, that list will generate itself, and then we'll start making progress on it.
Well, this is the last question that I have for you. So you'll officially take over as the superintendent on August 1st.
Okay.
Can you share more about your entry plan? What will your first 30, 60, 90, 120 days, perhaps the first year, look like?
So August 1st is my technical start date. It is too late to hit the ground and be fully prepared for the beginning of the school year. So I'm going to work before August 1st. Like I've said, the team has been wonderful in terms of transition. The board and Dr. Radigan and the cabinet and the building level administrators that I've met. And so I tend to, I have submitted an entry plan. I'm working on making it very, very formal now that I'm starting to know people and issues and things like that. But I tend to think of it in 2-month spans is the way that I tend to look at it. Every 2 months is just a different set of people, because really the first year has to be about the people and the culture and the community. And you don't know that unless you're interacting with them. And so July and August really will be my opportunity to do that with the board, the cabinet, the administrators. It'll be important for me to get to know them, get to know the perceived needs in terms of the district, as well as things. There's lots of work that has already been done, right? And as very appropriate as you plan for next year. And so to work with them to make sure that my personal goals, as well as the district goals for next year, but also I'm a big believer in making sure that we're talking 3 and 5 years out. It's important to think about where do we want to get. And sometimes you have to course correct, but if you're not thinking about that long range, and so that'll be part of what we'll do in July and August as we interact with those groups. Once you get into September and October, that'll be my favorite part, because that'll be when I can get into the schools. I just love spending time in classrooms and watching the wonderful things that happen between a teacher and a group of students. And so for me to get to know the administrators and the teachers and the students, and then that's a good way through events, when we connected one of your other questions, to start to get to know the community. That those will be my first opportunities to be out and about where there are groups of parents and individual parents that I can interact with and say, that was really awesome that your daughter was able to, whatever the thing is that we're talking about. Then once we get into November, December, and into the beginning of 2019, that's when the community circle spreads, because there are a lot of wonderful opportunities because of where we live, that are resources and our partnerships. You know, you think about Bucks County Community College, you think about local business leaders, you think about the work with the intermediate unit. I think about the close relationship that Dr. Radigan has with the superintendents at Palisades and at Quakertown, and even all the county superintendents I know, but especially those 3 working together to share resources and ideas, and working with me to simply help me understand the culture and when we call snow days and when we don't, things like that everybody's going to want to know about when we hit February from that standpoint. I hope it's not till February. And so I think that will be, as you look at that, my first, whatever you would put it on, whether you go 120 days or go first year, is going to be about getting to know the people, getting to know what's important to them, getting to know strengths, being able to build upon the teams and the ideas that are currently in place already.
You did it. Let's give them So that concludes the second and middle piece of our evening. Before we transition to Dr. Bolton's closing comments and Ms. Megan Banis-Clemens' wrap-up comments, I just want to take a moment to thank the wonderful administrative team here at the school district to help put such a wonderful evening together. It takes a lot of work to get an auditorium to look this beautiful and a hallway this beautiful after a long day of school. I want to thank the student programs that were so instrumental in making today's evening student-focused, to your point, and delicious with the cookies.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I also want to thank the intermediate unit and Pennridge School District technical teams for their assistance not only with the audio and the visual, but with the streaming so that folks from home and folks in the future can watch this event. Dr. Bolton, we're going to turn the floor back over to you so that you can conclude with your comments, and then following those comments, Ms. Banis-Clemens, it's yours to wrap up the evening.
Well, thank you. I'm a roamer, so I'm going to, Dr. Hoffman, thank you. I really do appreciate the fact. So one of the things that Mark didn't say is that one of my first jobs in Central Bucks, is that okay, Elizabeth, to do that? I probably should work it. All right. One of my first jobs in Central Bucks was the principal of NAMI. And so I had 2 Hoffmans on the staff. that were both unbelievable teachers from that standpoint. So that was my first interaction with both Mark and his wife Lisa, who now works in Quakertown. Am I allowed to say that? All right, never mind. We'll talk about that. So from that standpoint. And so I do want to say my thank yous as well. I really do appreciate those of you who were able to come out tonight and those of you who submitted questions. I think that was a really nice kind of encapsulation of what the interview process looked like in terms of the areas that were asked. I do want to thank the board. I want to thank my family. I want to thank the cabinet for being here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I want to thank the sound people. I want to thank the high school administration. I want to thank all of the students that were involved. It's really, really important. I want to recycle one of the things that I said last week for those of you who read the newspaper. Right? Forgive me for repeating the quote. But as I thought about what I want to say as we're ending the evening, it really does connect back to one of the things that I thought about. So I said when I was appointed last week and had an opportunity very briefly to just say thank you or just kind of say, hey, here's who I am. I am vacillating back and forth, although it's getting less vacillating, which is a good thing, between just being thrilled to death for the opportunity. Right? I wanted to do this since at least I was 12. I'm not sure had I written it in 4th grade what I would have said, but I know in 6th grade I was there. I went to school knowing that I was going to be my father professionally. And so to be able to call my dad, sorry. Well, just thought it was really cool to call my dad. All right. and to be able to talk to him through that process and to interact with that from that standpoint was pretty special. And so just to be thrilled for the opportunity, but to not lose sight of being humbled by the responsibility that working with students day in and day out bring all of us. And that's not different from a superintendent to a teacher to a support staff to whatever role you might play in the school district, right? Because if you are in the process of impacting a kid, it is vital that we do it as well as we can, right? And so that really is, as I've been more thrilled than scared to death, because initially it was like, oh my gosh, now they said yes and now I have to actually do the job in terms of that piece. And so as you get more comfortable, right, as I've dug in deeper, I've gotten more comfortable with the team and knowing the strengths that are in place, getting to know the board better in terms of their support for education and those types of things. I've gotten much more thrilled for the opportunity and scared to death, but humbled by that piece. And so I do just want to say publicly again that as we think about the importance of doing that for all of the students in the Pennridge School District and making sure that we look, right, it is a motto, but they are words that are important. And sometimes it can become a tagline and things that we don't think about. But as someone new to your system, I think there's a lot of power in thinking about why the words were chosen as they were in terms of that piece. So you think about what does it look like to be proud. And so whether that is of your school district or of your piece of art or of your singing ability or of a cookie, right, or of a little pea that you put in the flowers just to make them smile. You know, whatever that is, for students to feel proud, for teachers to feel proud, for the superintendent to feel proud of the work that we did for whatever comes next. And some of those next are significant, more significant than other in terms of life decisions, but they're not any less important when a first grader learns how to read, right, than it is a senior graduate. And so to think about that, to think about the importance of what does principle mean, right? We all want kids to be good, right? I mean, nobody sits there and says, yeah, well, my kid's not very nice, but that's okay. Right? It's the blueberries we got. There's a really good story about the blueberries that come in, and they're the blueberries you get, right? It's not like you get to choose just the blueberries you want. And so we've got to make sure all the blueberries are principled and know what is expected of them as students, what's expected of them more importantly as community members and as citizens, and that starts from day one in terms of how do you get on with us, right? And those types of things are just really, really important to do that, and that's vital to thinking about the role we play every day. And then finally, obviously the goal is to be prepared. I just don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about, for me, that has almost nothing to do with whatever the final prepared is, although that's not insignificant. But if that's the only one we're talking about, if we're only talking about what college they get into and we're not talking about second grade prepared, then we can miss an awful lot of opportunities for it to be a lot better, right? When they're leaving 12th grade and we're thinking about what's my career, what does the military have to offer, what are my job opportunities for college, right? Whatever that is that they're I think those things are important. I would encourage you to just continue to, I'm certain I'm preaching to the choir, right? To stay involved in making Pennridge as strong as it can be, because it is not just my work, it is not just our work, people in front, right? You who are sending blueberries have a lot more in the game than I do in terms of their long-term success. For us to do that well, and for you to say, yes, you did that well, or to say politely, I don't think you did that so well, have you considered? Those are conversations we need to have. Okay? So thank you for tonight. I look forward to getting to know many of you over a cookie. I appreciate you coming out tonight. And thank you.
Thank you to all of the staff and students that helped put this together. The amount of work that went into this to prepare for tonight from all of these people, truly thank you. Anita Cron couldn't be here tonight, but she helped organize this in a very short period of time. So thank you to her as well. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. Your support in this process has been invaluable. I can't thank you enough for everything that you did, and thank you very much for running this night for us tonight. Dr. Bolton, welcome to Pennridge. We're so excited to work with you. I'm looking forward to all of the feats Pennridge is going to attain under your leadership. So thank you so much for saying yes and for being here with us. And thank you everyone for coming out to welcome him to Pennridge. And I hope you all have a good night. Thanks.